Hey, Chandler Bolt here, and joining me today is Carlos Whittaker. Carlos is a People's Choice Award winner, former recording artist on a major label, and we've met, and so I don't know how I didn't know this. Currently spends a lot of time writing books and speaking on stages. Is actually traveling for a speaking gig right now. So today we're going to be talking about how he sold 50,000 copies of his book, Kill the Spider, as he would say, out of the trunk of his car. Or really from iPads in lobbies. And so if you're a speaker, if you're someone who wants to speak, if you're a speaker who wants to sell more books from your speaking gigs, or if you're someone who wants to speak from your books, this is gonna be an awesome interview. Carlos is amazing. Carlos, great to have you here.
Thanks, Chandler, man. I'm so excited that we get to do this. Thanks for having me.
So let's take it back a little bit. Like, why did you decide to write your first book? I think you got 3 books now. Like, why did you decide to write your first book, and what was the purpose kind of behind that first book?
Yeah, I had I was a recording artist, so I was like singing. That was my gig, right? But even before I was a recording artist, like I had this blog that I just loved to write. Like I'd write a paragraph a day, like 5 days a week for like 7 years. I just was always. And for the first 6 years, literally, it was like my mom and my aunt that would read it every day. Like, but I loved writing so much that, for those of you that aren't old enough to know what a blog is, it's basically like Instagram, but you own it. Okay. And so I always had a knack for writing, and I actually enjoyed it. And so, once my platform, like year 7, that's when I had this video go viral. The 7th year I was writing this blog, and that really like increased my platform tremendously. This was like 2010, and then all these people started finding my blog, and then publishers started finding my blog, and they're like, "Hey, this guy's got," and then suddenly it was like 30,000 readers a day, and people were, and I was like, "This is really cool." Like, but again, the whole time I'm actually a singer, right? So. But I had more people reading my words than buying my music. And so it just became this thing where I was like, you know what, like I actually love to write. I'm okay. Like I'm an okay singer and I love to perform, but I really love to tell stories. That's probably why I like to perform is I like the between the songs. And I just had enough people kind of lean into me and say, hey, listen, like I think people view you as a thought leader, not necessarily a worship leader. And so why don't you think about writing a book? And so the first book was really like it's like my best blogs for 7 years. Like I just went back into the, my Evernote file, my WordPress, and I found, okay, what are the stories that I had the most comments? What are the stories that had the most traction? And then I would turn, 3 paragraphs into a chapter. And the book was called Moment Maker. You can live your life or your life will live you. And it was just about creating, receiving, and rescuing moments. And that's really, people followed me for kind of that side of life. Like, oh, Carlos is always doing fun things. He's always experimenting things. He's a moment maker. So it made sense to do that as the first book. And so, like I look back at that first book, it seems like so freaking long ago now. It came out in 2014. And man, it was like the little book that could. Like I was, it sold horribly. Like it just didn't sell anything. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to sell books. It was like my little experiment. But I look back at it, and every once in a while, like I'll go on Amazon and I'm like, and I check all my author analytics, and I'm like, oh my gosh, people are still buying this book. Like they're buying my little blog book, and I'm like proud of it, and that book, I think really laid the groundwork for the next 2, which have been way more successful. But it's always that first book, man. That first book, I'm really proud of. So. And
2 quick follow-ups on that. So that one was with Zondervan.
Yep.
Is that right? Okay. And so, how did you have publishers approach you? Like, how did that process work?
Yeah. So again, because of my blog and because of again, it really wasn't social media at the time. I guess there was a little bit of social media happening at the time, but definitely I remember very specifically, they wanted to know my blog traffic, like how many readers a day, how many people were coming a day to my website. And that was it, man. I mean, that was why publishers were coming to me. They were, I would go and I would sing at these conferences, but I'd have these publishers saying, hey, like, I know you're singing, I know you have a record deal, but like, we'd really love to publish a book. Have you thought about writing? Like, you're a really good writer. and yeah, and so I didn't have an agent. Like I was just kind of like solo, like what am I doing? And I had a couple meetings with a couple publishers, and I thought, you know what, I think I'm probably eating my pants on this deal that they're doing. So I went and I found an agent. Esther Fed was her name, and she did my first 2-book deal with Zondervan and HarperCollins. And so Moment Maker was the first of the 2 books. And yeah, it was definitely, there was no bidding war. Like Zondervan may have been the only offer. I think I had some really low, offers, but they came in to where, at least as a first time author, I was like, oh, like someone would actually pay me to write a book. This is kind of weird.
Yeah.
And, it in no way, shape or form recouped the advance at all. That was, maybe it will in 100 years. But it was, yeah, man, it was that first book, and still super proud of it. But they definitely found me because of my online kind of platform.
So building a presence and how important that is to sell to sell books if you're self-published, but also to sell yourself to a publisher if you want a traditional publishing deal. Any quick tips for folks who maybe already have a blog about the process of taking your best blog post and your best received blog post and kind of coherently putting that into a book? Because I think there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. And I'm sure you kind of went through it and found the right way to do it. So any tips there?
Yeah, I think, I think for sure, the first thing people are going to need to realize is that you're going to need to have, in order to really take writings that you've put online and turn that into something that your blog reader would actually want to read. It's like, they don't want to just read the same blog, right? You actually have to have like a lot bigger volume of work than you think. And so for me, I mean, you have to think, like I was blogging 7 years, 5 days a week. Like I was putting content out, like really writing at least 1 to 3 paragraphs a day. Like today, what I'm going to write about, what's going on in the world, and I would write and I would do it. And so I think the reason why it was able to be turned into a book is I had just such a it's not like I just had 30 blog posts that I was trying to turn into 13 chapters, right? Like I had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And so I think, if you're wanting to do that, and one of your listeners is like, okay, how can I turn my blog into, you just need to write a lot, because the more you put out there, the more traction you're going to be able to see, and the more kind of true analytics you're going to be able to see throughout the kind of the whole scope of your writing. And so I'm glad that I had, I'm not going to say everyone needs to wait 7 years. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is I do feel like you need to do this for a long time in order to see a good year. Like give yourself 5 days a week for a solid year where you're putting content out. It doesn't have to be on a blog now. It could be on Instagram. It could be on Facebook. But just see what's getting the most traction. And yeah, that's really what I did. And then obviously I hired a writing coach for my first book, not just an editor, but actually had a coach. And she like held my hand through the whole thing. I mean, we did the whole, story arc and tried to make this thing, turn into a book instead of it feeling like just a blog that's printed out, right? And so she was very helpful in that process as well. And so she probably helped me the most when it came to trying to figure out what stories were going to work the best.
That's great. Now you talked about the first book not selling anywhere near as well as the second and third book, and kind of being the jumping off point, or the learning playground, if you will, for the second and third book. So what did you learn from the launch of the first book that changed the way you launched and marketed the second and third book? And what do you think were the major differences and why those books sold so much better?
Yeah, I would definitely say that the first book was a book that I wanted to write, that felt good for me, that I thought maybe this could help a lot of people. And I think all those things are fine. Like, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people approach their books that way, like, oh, like I'm good at this. Some people tell me I'm good at this, so they must want what this is. And so I'm gonna write about it. Well, the difference that I found in the next 2 books is that the next 2 books, I went very strategically towards a pain point of my audience. Like I went towards what is their pain point. And I'm telling you, that was the difference, man. That was, I literally asked him, like I asked him for the second book. I'm like, hey, like, what can I help you with? Like what, because like I'm, people would call me a self-help writer or, Christian life or whatever it may be. And so I mean, I had had an audience that was waiting to tell me this is what we're struggling with. And so I'm like, sweet, then I'm going to write you that book, And so I think that was very beneficial because now I knew that they wanted it. So that was super helpful. And then also, and this goes into my speaking career. Again, I think I have like natural charisma and like natural woo when I get on stage. So I can get on stage and make people feel things. I can make them cry. I can make them laugh. I can do whatever. Like I'm very comfortable in doing those things. But can I make them buy my book? Now, again, the goal of a talk, for me at least, is to help people, give them practical ways that they can solve some sort of problem in their life. But I also know that them just listening to my talk isn't going to help them the way that my book can really help them. So honestly, I don't feel bad trying to sell my book from stage. Like I know, like you guys may love that how I'm tickling your ear right now, and you may think like, oh, those are 3 great points, but those aren't going to change your lives. Like what I poured into the book, that's going to change your life. So I really tweaked my talk the first 2 months that the second book came out. It was a lot of like beta testing. Okay, I'm gonna try this. Like what were sales, in the lobby afterwards? Okay, I'm only hitting 7%. I really think I can hit 10%. Go to the next place. I'm gonna tweak this. Oh, bam. And then I kept doing it. And then finally, like one day it went from like 9% to like 25% of the audience bought my book. And it never went down after that. Like that was the talk. And I knew it. I was like, oh, I found it, the sauce. And so once I found that secret sauce, right? Like I just stuck to that. That's like that's now the talk for Kill the Spider. With my third book, Enter Wild, I'm still, it released during COVID, during a quarantine. So like I'm doing Zoom, a lot of Zoom presentations. Like I can't get good analytics from who's buying my books in a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm still tweaking that talk, and that'll probably 2021 will probably be when that one is really I'll be able to tweak it. But for me, a big thing is the talk, man. The talk. When I hit it and I hit it right, I know when I look in the room exactly how many books I'm gonna sell.
Wow, that's wild. Okay, I want to unpack that, and I want to circle back to kind of other things that you do to or have done to market books 2 and 3, because I think there's a lot there that would be helpful for people. And I love the start with the pain, right? Is because if you know, if we call it like the 4 P's of a high converting offer: person, pain, promise, price. And so it's like, if you know the person that you're talking to because they're in your audience, then the pain that they have, and then the promise that you can make them through the hook of the book, and then obviously the price of the book or the price of whatever's beyond the book, then it's going to convert better, right? But let's walk through that 9 to 25% of the audience converting to purchase your book. So I mean, for some people who might just say, hey, how do you even know that? And then what are the average audience size? And then, I mean, obviously the big question is how'd you do it? Like, what are the things practically that you changed about your talk that influence that?
Yeah. I think, and again, as an author, when you talk and you're trying to sell your book, you can get too far into being the hero of your own story on stage. Like you just want to tell your story because, like, especially if you're writing kind of memoir-esque. All my books are, people would say they're categorized as like self-help, but they're memoirs that walk people through my life and my poor decisions and how I corrected them, right? And so I think at the beginning, my talks were very, this is my story. And I think you can relate to my story. And the whole thing was my story. So like my talk was like my story, and people were weeping during it. I mean, they were just connecting. They were laughing. I mean, they were like dying laughing, belly laughing. And I'll never forget, like, I'm like, man, like this is working. This talk, like I'm connecting. But just week after week, like no one would buy the book. Like they would laugh, but then I go to the lobby and like, I'd sell 10% of the crowd, and again, I normally speak, I mean, I really speak to every size group, but I'd say an average, if I'm like kind of like on my weekly, what I do, there's 2,500 people in the room. And, and so still even like 9%, that's a lot of books. Like that's good. Like I'll make some extra money for that. But when I switched it to the first half of my talk was like my story. And then I suddenly went straight into their pain point, and they became the hero of the story. Bro, that was a game changer. Like suddenly they were lining up at the book table. Like they were, wrapping around. Suddenly, like I was still telling personal stories, but I was like very practical. Was like, this is how you can do it. And something else I started doing that really helped, I would say, listen, in chapter 7, like I say it, chapter 7 of my book, Kill the Spider, I go into the very specifics on how you can today kill your spider. Like today, you don't have to wait. You don't have to go to therapy for 3 months. You don't have to do, like, you can kill this thing today. I'm telling you, man, people, I guarantee they'd buy the book and just go straight to chapter 7. Don't be scared to sell your book. Don't be scared to on stage say that this book can change your life. And so I think those were kind of 2 big keys that really helped me when it came to selling in live events, selling at live events. And then, so I mean, that's when it started going to, and then I just found a story, like a super inspirational story with 2 pictures of stars that I took. They're just very powerful images. And that's how I started to end my Kill the Spider talk. And I'm always a fan of ending your talk with a gasp. If you can make your audience gasp in some way, and there's an audible gasp every time I do this illustration from across. It doesn't matter if I'm like I was like at a big pen designer summit, and then or I'm like at some like Christian revival. It doesn't matter. Like both audiences gasp when I tell the story, and that gasp for me when I hear it, I'm like, I'll see you at the book table. Like it just so yeah, I talk. I mean, that's what I do full time. Like I'm traveling, I'm speaking, so I get to tweak. I get to make changes. I get to try different things. And then when I get it, man, I get it. So
that's awesome. So making your audience the hero of the story and less about you and more about them. And then also you mentioned what my buddy Pete Vargas would call like embedding, right? Like, so embedding examples or embedding how it connects to specific chapters in the book throughout the talk. Can you walk through, like, what's an example of, so I'm speaking and what's an example of flipping between how you were doing it to how that would show up differently of like, and so for other speakers who are out there who are saying, hey, I mostly understand that, Carlos, but like, can you give me an example of how I would switch from and actually put my audience as the hero of the story so that they see themselves and so that, helps the book sales.
Yeah. So, most of, at the beginning, my talk was like, life sucks. And at the end, I was like, life is great. Read my book and your life can be great too. Okay. There's the 10-second version of the talk. And again, as a speaker, that actually, like, if you're not trying to sell anything, I think it's a very good way to encourage an audience, and to people love testimonies. People love to kind of hear those things, but it's not a good way to sell a book. So now I literally tell like I take people a lot quicker to my pain point at the beginning of, like, it used to be, it'd take me 15 minutes in my talk to even get to like the drama. Now it's in the first 3 minutes. Like I'm like, bam, I'm in. And then I allow them to go with me and to start seeing how I started to repair my life. So, and we'll just use Kill the Spider as an example. Kill the Spider, the easy analogy is a spider is an agreement you've made with the lie. That's what we have to kill. And a cobweb, where most people clean the cobwebs instead of killing the spider, is a medicating behavior. So most people are trying to medicate behaviors, are trying to stop medicating behaviors, as opposed to trying to find the lie that's causing them to medicate the behavior. So my talk was all about my journey on my cobwebs and then killing my spider. But what I changed it to was, I started saying, okay, here's 5 common cobwebs that are in this room. And bam.
Nice.
So suddenly I started talking to them. I was like, there's some of you guys that are struggling with pornography. Pornography is your medicator, and you're trying to put a porn blocker on your phone. I get very specific to them. And so you think, oh, I'm going to put a porn blocker on my phone, which is going to help me kill the spider. Well, that's just cleaning the cobwebs, right? And so I kind of take them the whole thing out. Some of you guys are addicted to work. You're workaholics, and it doesn't look as bad as porn, but it's just as bad as the medicating behavior. And then so I start touching them pretty quick into my talk. And then I give them examples of the spiders that they could be believing, the lies they could be believing. The reason why you're looking at porn may be because You don't believe the truth that you can find true intimacy the way you were created to find true intimacy. And that's probably comes from a childhood trauma or something like that. So I take them there really fast. Now they're like, oh my gosh, he's reading my mail, right? And then I say, okay, but this is how you can specifically kill it. Okay, so I'm going to give you the steps. And I always say this. I always say, and this was a risk at the beginning, but a friend of mine told me to do this. I say, listen, I'm talking about my book, but you don't even have to buy my book. This is what I say this from stage. You don't have to buy my book to kill your spider. I'm going to tell you right now how to kill it. You confess the lie, you reject the lie, and then you replace the lie, right? I give them and they're like, whoa, he just gave me like the sweet manna. Like, this is it. Like, so I give them that, and then I'm like, but this is how you reject the lie, right? And then so that's when I go into chapter. In chapter 7, I talk about specifically, and I give you verbs, I give you paragraphs that you can read out loud to reject the lies. And I give them an example. In chapter 8, so I really bring my chapters of my books in heavy for a good 10 minutes of my talk. And I'm telling you, that's the point where I see people come to the book table, and as they're in line, they're on chapter 8, like reading exactly what I told them. So in my head, I'm like, as a marketing guy, I'm like, okay, like that got them to buy the book, you know? And so, I mean, those are some specific ways that I've kind of changed it up.
That's great. And I think an important thing to emphasize, because I think a lot of people will hear this and it's like, oh, so I got to make a decision between an impactful talk and a talk that sells my books.
Right,
and these
right.
two things are mutually exclusive, right? But I think what's so important is that exactly like you said, is I can inspire someone in 45 minutes, but probably not create lasting change.
Yeah.
And the book is the continuation of that conversation that actually allows them to spur lasting change. So not only is it a more impactful talk,
Yeah.
but it also, yes, sells more books, which helps make the talk even be even more impactful.
And again, if you really are into, I call myself a hope dealer. I'm like, if I'm really a hope dealer, then I really need to care more about how I feel my talk went. Like at the end of the day, like if I'm trying to really create lasting change in someone's life, it's not going to be, I've never got an email saying, gosh, Carlos, like I heard your talk and I changed my life. Like no, but the emails I get are, dude, I read Kill the Spider. That book changed my life. I bought 10, gave them out to my friends. It's changing their lives. No one's ever told me that a talk has changed their life. They've always told me that my book has changed their life. So if I know that that's the case, why in the world would that not be the goal, to get people to read the book?
Yeah, that's great. Now, so is that how you sold the lion's share of those 50,000 copies?
Yeah, man, lobbies, and lobbies and more lobbies. And I was just out there shucking. I had my little card reader and my kids, and they're, you know, I don't have any, I'm not a fan of like merch. I don't have the merch. Like it's just books, like straight up books. And so, yeah, that's how I sold. I'd say, almost all of them were at events, you know, like I didn't do a lot of, now that's changed a lot in 2020 with Enter Wild. Almost all of my books have been online. None of them have been live. I may have sold 30 books in like a live event setting this year, just because nobody's doing that. But I definitely sold the majority of my books. I say it out of my trunk because I just have I have boxes of books in my trunk. I have another suitcase. And that was at the beginning of the grind. Now I've got a little better system with my bulk ordering process where they ship the books to the event center and then they'll ship them back. But it's still like cut open the boxes and start shucking those things, man. Start selling them. And I've sold a lot of freaking books that way.
Yeah. Hey, and let's just spend a couple more minutes on that. Like, can you walk us through pro tips you've learned from doing this over years? Like I'm talking like real in the weeds of like for other speakers. So like you mentioned the bulk ordering process, like how do you so you have them shipped there, or are you doing like, how do you, anything you've done from a workflow perspective to help like the line move faster to sell more books? Like pro tips on that front?
Yeah, I love that stuff. Always, because people want you to sign the books. You will sell less than half of the amount you will normally sell if you sign the books at the same place they're buying the books. So I always have the biggest, the way I've seen the most kind of upswing as far as book sales at live events. I sign the books about 20 feet away from where people buy the books. And I always give people 2 book tables. So it's always 2 lines to 2 tables. And then they get their book and then they come 20 feet over to where I'm at to sign it. Whenever you sign the books at the same table they're buying, the line gets backed up. People don't know, am I in line to sign? Am I in line to buy the book? And so that's a huge thing that I try to tell all my author friends all the time. Is like, move 20 feet away from where you're selling your books, get volunteers. I've got a whole kind of process. Maybe I'll email you my, I've got a kind of like a sheet that I send to the venue looking for volunteers, and all the training for how the volunteers work. That's something that may be valuable. And then I use, it's called Bulk Books. And they're actually part of my speakers bureau, but they do book advancing for anybody if you're an author. Yeah, and I pay them a little bit of a fee, but they ship all the books with all the return labels, with all the instructions. They ship the iPad, they ship the card reader. I used to have to carry all that stuff. I had everything in my backpack before I get there an hour early, and I'm setting up my table and I'm setting up the books and I'm putting up all the things. Now, like, all that's in the box with instructions. There's actually like a YouTube video that they watch now explaining, the volunteers watching their phones, showing how to set the table up. I don't ever even see the thing. Like, I show up, they're selling the books, and then I never see them anymore. It's great.
That's
and then
amazing,
they ship that. Oh, dude, it's the best. So that was a big, they take, I want to say they take about 15% of my sales, but dude, it's been worth it. I've sold so many more books, or more than the 15% I'm paying them. So that's been helpful. Trying to think. I always, whoever's ending the event that you're speaking at. I mean, I am a. Can you say Nazi anymore? Is this like politically correct? I'm a stickler when it comes to, like, I will tell them 20 times before I get on stage, I need whoever's following me to not forget to hold my book in their hand and say, Carlos will be at the book table afterwards. I can go from selling, to, it'll normally be 25% of the room. If they forget to do that, it's 5%. Like, I know in a second, if they don't do that, people won't even know. People will forget. They don't hear it. The last thing they need to hear is, hey, Carlos is in the back. This is his book. And so, like, that's in my contract now. That somebody, even if they don't want someone to close the event or whatever, someone besides me has to come up and say, he's going to be back there. He's signing books. He'd love to meet you. That's a game changer.
Oh, that's super smart.
Yeah.
How do you forecast, like, and what's your process there of how many books to send to the venue versus the crowd and all that stuff?
Yeah.
Do you overshoot? Do you undershoot? How do you do that?
Yeah, I always overshoot. Again, most of the authors in my world are selling 8 to 9% of the room. And so initially I would order about 15% of what they said people would be, Now, once I tweaked my talk and I started hitting like 25% of the room, like on a regular basis, I would sell out every single time I go somewhere. I'm like, I'd send 50%, sell out, 20%, sell out. And I hated it. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm leaving money on the table. And so now I shoot for 30 to 35%. And it feels like a lot. Like when these places get books, my boxes of books, and they're like, bro, they sent a lot of books. And I'm always like, I'm going to sell them, and they're like, yeah, and they're always like, no, like normally people, cause they always tell us too, especially if I'm doing like a corporate event, they're like, just, send 5% of our audience or 10% of the audience. That's what you'll probably sell. And I always wait, and they're always like, you're not going to sell this many books. Like, this is annoying. And then they're like, wow, you sold so many books, So, but like the industry standard is 10 to 15% is what you want to order. And then you want to try to get there. Now here's the deal. Moment Maker, I have not gotten that talk to sell that many books. Like if I do a Moment Maker talk, I'm at 9-10%. Enter Wild, my third book, I'm at like, and I haven't done a lot of events, but I'm at like, I don't know, 12 to 15%. And I know, okay, I've got to work on this talk. Like I'm going to work on this talk in order to get it to where I want to get there again. So that's kind of like my math, how it works.
Okay, cool. I've got, oh my gosh, so many follow-up questions. This is awesome. Any other pro tips on just like, I love the comeback. Carlos will be there signing books. He'd love to meet you. The 2 tables, 20 feet apart. Anything else that you kind of learned the hard way or wish you knew about this process to just even just workflow wise or optimizing for even more books sold?
Yep. Everyone wants their book signed. So I always have a volunteer in the book signing line giving them Post-it notes, and they write their name on the Post-it note to where I don't have to ask them how to spell it. I can just open it and start signing it right away, and actually look at them and have more of a conversation instead of the conversation being, "Hey, my name's Carlos. What's your name?" "Hey, my name's Ed." And that's not there. So now I got the name already. It just creates more of a connecting point with your reader. And I'm just telling you, those tiny things. Now that the conversation isn't "What's your name?" your conversation is, "What'd you do yesterday? Like, what spider are you trying to kill? What are you?" Suddenly they're like, "Wow, just a strong connection." And I know that sells more books the next time I put a book out. So there's that kind of like post-it strategy. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Listen, I'm all about, when my kids were like 7, 9, and 10, I would sell way more books when my kids were selling them. Like, don't be scared to use your cute kids, man. People come to, "Oh, you're Carlos's kid. I saw you on the video, in the single ladies video." And then, dude, people take pictures with my kids. People have my kids sign their books. That's a lot of fun. So, whatever. Whatever works, man.
Yeah. How many iPads do you have? Is there like multiple points of sale?
Yep. So I got one person taking cash, and I have 2 iPads. So
okay.
An iPad at each table. So
wow, man,
yeah.
That's awesome. So as you look to, book number 3 just came out, Inner Wild, which, by the way, super impressive. Just how many reviews you have on these books. It's awesome. Yeah, and even just Inner Wild already having 450 reviews.
I know. I actually just saw that the other day, to be honest with you. Like, I went on there and I was like, what? Because it's only been out since June, and it took me 3 years to get that many for Kill the Spider. So
yeah,
I don't know, like that's given me some, a little pep in my step.
It's 150 reviews less than the book before that, which has 3 years more of runway, right? Which is awesome, and just, I think, speaks to the momentum that's already happening with the newest book. So as you think about revising your talk, I'd love to just walk back through your process, right? So you got a new talk, it's converting at 9%, 10%, 12%. I think you said somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
How do you go from first draft to second draft? Or how do you think about, these are the 2 to 3 things that I should change or could change that will maybe impact this?
Yeah. And also I have to keep reminding myself that Kill the Spider was such a massive pain point for people. Like, everybody, when I give that analogy, a spider's an agreement you made with a lie, and a cobweb's a medicating behavior, bro, it sells itself, man. Like that is just, people are like, oh, like their minds are like, what? And so
it's great. Yeah.
And so like, for me, like, I knew that title is still my strongest title, Kill the Spider. I have to figure out with my Enter Wild talk. And I've actually sent this talk to like 10 authors that I like admire their speaking ability. I'm having them listen to my talk to be like, what can I change? Actually, only one of them has gotten back to me, but what he said was that I'm not, I've made the crowd the hero, I'm doing all those things, but I'm not making the book important enough. And I feel that they're right. Like, again, I feel like with my Enter Wild talk, people can leave with the talk and feel like they can pretty much, and the whole goal of Enter Wild is to leave a mild faith and enter a wild faith. And I feel like after my talk, people feel like they may not need the book. And so what I've got to do is figure out how to make the book more necessary. One of the things I'm going to do is talk about these prayers that I have written out in Enter Wild that I'm going to get more specific about in my talk. Listen, I've got written out my daily prayer that I pray every single day in the morning. It takes 15 minutes. It's changed. Just this one prayer itself has changed everything about who I am, how I treat my family, how I treat my kids. It's made my faith go from mile to mile. This prayer, and the prayer is in the back of the book. And I promise you, if you guys, and I'm just kind of practicing with you, but this is now where I'm thinking, like, I think that's what I'm going to have to start shifting towards a little bit with Enter Wild. And also, it doesn't have the gasp moment at the end yet. Like, there's not the, but I have an idea what it's going to be, but it has to be a live room in order for me to do that. And so I'll just tell you what my idea is. I tell this story about having asthma, and when I moved to Tennessee, I didn't have asthma as a child, but when I moved to Tennessee, over the course of living here because that's one bad thing about Nashville is like the allergies. Over the course of 6 months of living here, I started to develop allergies, but I didn't know it. And so my wife told me, hey, you're wheezing every night. Like when you're breathing, you're wheezing. I was like, what do you mean I'm wheezing? I feel fine. Like I felt fine. But it's because it was a slow ramp up to not being able to breathe. So I went to an allergist and he had me do a breathing test and he said I was only breathing at 60%. And I was like, what? He said, your lungs are only working at like 60% capacity. So then he gave me an inhaler and he's like, I want you to take a hit of this. So then I took a hit of that. And suddenly my lungs, after I took that albuterol, went from 60% to 100%. And it was like I felt like a brand new man. Like I didn't know that I was suffocating. So that's like the story, right? And I tell that story right now at the end of my Inner Wild Talk, and people are like, they kind of get it. But what I want to do is I found this YouTube video during World Asthma Day, where they ask you to get a straw and to breathe through the straw for 30 seconds. And what I want to do is my gasp moment, I think live, is I'm going to hand out 2,000 straws, and I'm going to have everybody, after I give that talk, I'm going to say, or that story, I want everyone to breathe for 30 seconds. You can't cheat. So I'm going to have them start to breathe through the straw, and you get labored. Like it's hard to breathe. And then at the very end, I'm going to say, when I count to 3, I want everyone to take one gasp of full breath instead of just 60%. And I've tried it one time, like with a group of students, and they were almost crying. They're like, oh, this is what I want to feel like. This is what I want to breathe. This is what it's supposed to feel like to live, you know? And so I feel like that's going to be my thing at the end. But I have yet to kind of try it like in a room. There's going to be more. I got to figure out how to do that. Like, how do I get 2,000 straws out? Do I want to hand them out at the beginning of the talk, in the middle of the talk? Like, how do I do that? So there's some things I have to figure out with that, but I think that's what I'm going to do. So anyway, again, I'm fiddling, I'm testing, I'm trying. The straw thing may not work, but I'm going to keep trying. So
yeah, that's amazing. Wow. Yeah. I've got a bajillion more questions for you, but we are about ran out of time. So I'll just ask kind of 2 final ones in closing. Yeah. The first one being, this has been awesome, by the way, knowing what you know now to the Carlos of 3 books ago. And so think about all the other Carloses out there who are pre-book 1. Right. And they're thinking about writing a book. They haven't done it yet. Like knowing what you know now, 3 books in, what would be kind of your parting piece of advice for those folks?
Yeah, gosh, you know, I feel like I would tell Carlos, first of all, I had a hard time even telling people I was an author until book 2. And I would tell Carlos before he even wrote book 1 to be confident in himself as an author. Like you are, if you're writing something, you're an author. Call yourself an author, tell people you're an author. And there's something about when you start claiming that over your life, that you start to walk in it. You start to walk with a little bit more swagger. And then I believe that your writing actually gets better. When you start writing, believing that you should be writing, listen, I mean, there's nothing worse. Every author knows when your book comes out, like Amazon reviews are your freaking worst fear, man. It is, you're standing butt naked in front of everybody. They're reading your book. And then you've slaved for 2 years over all these words. And someone, you know, I had someone leave a 1-star review. And they were like, yeah, like I read half the first chapter. And I was like, this book sucks. It's not for me. And I'm like, you know, like that stuff's just gutting. But no, like, because I'm so confident in my ability now, in my calling to be an author. So I'd say that's one thing. But the other thing would be something that really helped me, I think, at the beginning was because I had been writing for so long without the goal of it being a book. And I think that authors sometimes get stuck in the only time I'm going to write is when I'm writing for my project. When I would tell you, if you can't write for the love of writing, then I promise your project's not going to be as good as it needs to be. So if you're not there, it's not something you can't fall back in love with. Fall back in love with just the art of writing for the sake of writing. And I'm not saying you have to publish this stuff. Just put it in your own Evernote, put it in your own notes, and just write for yourself and keep that muscle building, growing, and just, you know, fall in love with writing as opposed to just writing for your projects. That's something that I even do right now. Like I'm in between projects and I still write every single day. I've got 1 paragraph that I say, I'm going to write a paragraph today. And you should see all that. I mean, this horrible, horrible stuff, like really bad writing, but it's keeping me, you know, it's keeping that muscle flowing and it's keeping me, I love it. Like I put in my Chronicles of Narnia soundtrack and I put on Father Christmas and I just start flowing, man. I start writing and it's good. So sometimes I write a paragraph, sometimes I'll write 1,000 words. It just depends, but I do it every single day.
Yeah, that's amazing. Carlos, this has been awesome. Really, really great. Where can people go to find out more about you, to buy your books, to support you and all that good stuff?
Yeah. You can buy my books. They're at all the places you buy books. But if you go to carloswhittaker.com with 2 T's, that'll kind of launch you out to all the book buying locations there. And then honestly, I'm an Instagram guy. Like that's the only place I hang out. I don't blog anymore. If I do, it's on Instagram. And so I'm on Instagram way more than you want me to be on Instagram. Like I'm the guy that has 100 dots across his story every single day. And so that's a fun place. But then if you want to hang out and have fun with me, Instagram. If you want to hang out and like be bothered by me, follow me on Twitter. So they're like it's like Jekyll and Hyde of Carlos. But you can follow me at both those places at Loswhit, LOSWHIT.
LOSWHIT. Carlos Whittaker. Hey, thanks so much, man. This was amazing.
This was awesome.
I appreciate you.
Yeah, dude, that was great.